There are people who were born to pick on other people's lives. The woman in House 14, for example, doesn't live. She manages the noises of the street, as if she were the conductor of an imaginary orchestra. Every laugh, dog step, or slipper-dragging sound is, according to her, an auditory aggression against the sanctity of the neighborhood. The other day, she sent a message in the group saying that a bird singing at 5 in the morning was proof that the fauna was in disarray because of noisy residents. Yes, she accused the birds. It all started when I decided to change the light bulbs in the yard for ones that light up with a motion sensor. I bought them wholesale, installed them in half an hour, tested them at night, and went to bed. The next day, I found a letter from her stuck to the gate, in such an aggressive tone that you could even feel a hint of her voice echoing in the printed words. It said, "The sharp, repetitive sound of the light bulbs going on at dawn is affecting my night's rest." Yes, now it was the sound of the lamp that was bothering her. Not the light, the sound. I swear, I ignored it. Because if you pay attention to everything this woman complains about, you'd stop breathing just to avoid irritating the air she breathes. But ignoring doesn't work with people who thrive on conflict. It's like cutting sugar from an anthill. Soon came the formal warnings from the HOA. First, a general warning about prolonged noise at night. Then, a more direct notice: continuous noise activities incompatible with the public welfare. In this one, she had the audacity to attach a decibel graph made on a cell phone app. The document was entitled Night Analysis, Noise Symphony of Lot 12. I didn't know whether to cry with laughter or sue her for abuse of a noun, but I let it roll, because what she wanted, more than silence, was a stage. And an empty stage is more annoying than any song. But, like any good character who gets lost in the script she creates, she went too far. She served me with a lawsuit. A real lawsuit. Letterhead, lawyer's signature, and everything. The charge? Continuous noise disturbance, community negligence, and deliberate disrespect for the urban auditory environment? I laughed, but I laughed so much that I had to sit down. That woman really believed she was about to win a court case over a sensor lamp and backyard laughter at a Saturday barbecue. The details she didn't know? The judge assigned to the case was my brother. Not a distant brother, the kind you only see at family parties. He was the kind of brother who knows by heart the sound of my laughter, the barking of my dog, and even the popping of my popcorn in the microwave. More than that, he was someone who had already met this woman years ago, in another case, when she tried to stop the installation of a walking track on the grounds that running shoes cause noise pollution. Only I didn't warn her, because watching her prepare to shine in her own circus was better than any spoiler. The woman began to produce evidence. She photographed my yard with a digital zoom until the pixels were distorted. She sent audios to her lawyer with sounds that were barely audible, but which, according to her, were ample proof of an auditory crime. She asked for testimony from neighbors who were actually traveling during the days of the alleged infractions, a veritable spectacle of legal fiction. Meanwhile, my brother just watched. He analyzed the documents with the same look he had when, as a child, he discovered that she had cut in line at the school cafeteria. I knew the guy. I knew it wasn't about noise. It was about control, about imposition, about that old "I'm the only one who knows what's best for everyone" syndrome. And the worst thing? She really thought she was right. The days before the hearing were surreal. I received a copy of the official complaint and almost framed the passage that read, "The defendant demonstrates a continuous pattern of acoustic behavior inappropriate for a planned residential zone." Me? Me? A continuous pattern of acoustic behavior? If that were a crime, half the neighborhood would already be on death row. She walked around the neighborhood with the complaint paper in her hand, as if she were a community heroine about to save everyone from an invisible threat. She walked along the sidewalks with a look of mission accomplished, glancing at every garden, as if the other residents were her silent army. On the eve of the hearing, My mailbox received one last handwritten note. I hope justice hears what you refuse to keep quiet. Poetic, if it weren't pathetic. And so ended the show's prologue, the part where the protagonist creates chaos and thinks she'll get away with it. Because the next day, the stage was going to change. And the play's judge already knew the lead actress well. The day of the hearing dawned gray, with that soap opera atmosphere that seems to whisper that something epic is going to happen. And, lo and behold, it did. The woman was ready. More than ready, in fact. She prepared herself as if she were going to run for a seat on the neighborhood Supreme Court. She arrived with a briefcase so thick it looked like she was carrying war evidence. Her heels tapped the courtroom floor like someone trying to mark her territory. Her hair was tied back with hairspray. She wore a burgundy blazer and an expression of someone who already imagined herself cutting the ribbon for the inauguration of a noise-free neighborhood. The most delicious scene was the moment she entered the room and saw who was sitting on top of the bench. The diva pose went down 3 floors. My brother didn't even look at her at first. He was busy reviewing the documents with that clinical, bored look he always wore when he picked up an absurd case. The same look he wore when our cousin tried to justify why he'd eaten the last piece of Grandma's pie. Pure contempt, wrapped in politeness. She choked on her pride. For a few seconds, she thought about leaving, feigning a headache or blaming her rhinitis. But she couldn't. She was already there. It was too late. She was about to argue, in front of the brother of someone she has known since the womb, that my laughter and my lamp were threats to public order. The irony was almost a slap in the face to logic. The hearing began with the presentation of her evidence. The lawyer, in an Olympian effort to remain serious, put the videos of the noise on the projector. The first one showed my backyard on any given night, lights going on and off with the sensor. The sound? Zero. Absolutely nothing. Then another video, me talking on the phone, outside. A good evening that echoed softly, and, according to her, was intimidating because of the sudden intensity of the tone. At that point, the judge, my brother, took a deep breath, crossed his fingers on the bench and said, "Is this the entirety of the audio that supports the charge of noise disturbance?" The lawyer choked, stammered, tried to argue that sound impact is measured not only in volume, but also in frequency of repetition. She nodded with such conviction that she almost broke her neck. But the tension in the room was visible. Even the lady at the back, who had come just to watch, widened her eyes like someone watching an actress overdoing it in rehearsal. The most absurd part came with the technical report she had commissioned. A printed document with colorful graphs and notes on non-quantifiable vibrational disturbances caused by repetitive domestic sound interactions. It looked more like an industrial astrology article than a technical report. The expert hired was a retired musician who taught recorder at his grandson's school. He said that nightly laughter and cheerful conversations generated emotional pollution in the surroundings. It was at that moment that the judge raised an eyebrow. That eyebrow, the same eyebrow he raised when he saw someone blatantly lying. Then he flipped through the file, sighed, and pulled out the minutes of her previous case. Yes, the one about the walking track, where she claimed that the footsteps caused stress to the squirrels in the area. At the time, the case had been dismissed for lack of documentary sanity. He then turned to her, with the coldness of a doctor tired of explaining that fever is not a reason for amputation. "Madam, this court is not the stage for subjective delusions disguised as civility. What you have presented in no way constitutes a legal infraction. There is no proven noise, there is no intent, and there is definitely no reason." She tried to answer. She opened her mouth like she was about to launch into a monologue worthy of an 8 o'clock soap opera, but the judge was already sentencing her. The case was dismissed on the spot. No need for a new trial, no right to appeal. It was as if a bucket of reality had been thrown over her performance. She left the room faster than she entered, her shoes making an almost sad tock-tock on the floor. The briefcase in her hands now seemed heavier, as if she was carrying not evidence, but the remains of a reputation that she herself had demolished. The funniest thing was seeing her lawyer, a guy who clearly only took the case for easy money, come out looking like he had just defended a conspiracy theory about vaccines at a real science symposium. Even he couldn't believe what he had to say. I sat there, watching it all with that discreet little smile of someone who didn't have to lift a finger to dismantle the circus. Because when a lie is based on exaggeration, all it takes is a small dose of truth to bring everything crashing down. The story should have ended there. She lost in court, the case was dismissed, and the least that could have been hoped for was that the woman would step back, rethink her existence, and perhaps focus on something more productive, like learning to get along with other people. But no, people like her don't accept defeat, not even when they're defeated by non-existent decibels in empty videos. For her, the audience wasn't the end. It was just a dramatic intermission. The next act was to come. In the days that followed, she hid. She didn't appear on the streets. She didn't send out a bulletin in the HOA group. She didn't organize a community coffee or question her next-door neighbor's new curtains. She just disappeared. And that, coming from someone who loved to appear as a statue of aesthetic authority, was already a sign that something was brewing. The calm was false. The hurricane was still swirling inside, just waiting for the next excuse to explode. That's when the anonymous complaints began. First, an urban control agent showed up at my house. They said there had been complaints about unregistered structural modifications to the balcony. Then, an inspector from the sanitation department asked if I was disposing of soapy water on the sidewalk, a complaint of environmental pollution. Then a request for an inspection from the electricity company, alleging irregular installation of spotlights. All in succession, without any grounds, but always with that tone of, "We've received an alert from your address." And all these visits, accompanied by someone taking photos from a distance. You could see the flash behind the hibiscus fence. She was now operating behind the scenes. She had lost the main stage, but she was still waving her strings like a frustrated puppeteer. Each new call was a desperate attempt to reverse the narrative. The woman wanted to paint the image of an unruly, rebellious neighbor, a threat to the peace of the neighborhood. But no one else was buying the performance, not even the organs she was trying to trigger. Because every organ that knocked on my door went back to the office with nothing in its hands, and a sigh of, "Here comes the lady from House 14 again." The most absurd thing happened one afternoon when I was washing the sidewalk. A municipal truck pulled up. The driver got out and said, "Sorry, I'm just following orders." He said there had been a complaint about the improper use of high-pressure jets that cause noise and particle displacement on public roads. I almost choked with laughter. The jet was a basic model, bought on sale. It barely made any foam. The man looked at it, saw that there was nothing wrong with it, shook his head, and said, "I'll be honest, sir. This is my 4th visit to this block in a month, all for the same type of complaint, always with a description of annoying and unhealthy noise activity. We know who's behind it, but the protocol obliges us to check." He apologized, made a symbolic note on his tablet, and left. And, of course, the shadow of someone peeking out from behind the curtain of House 14 didn't go unnoticed. You could even see the reflection of the telescope. It was so cartoonish that it looked like the script for a bad independent movie. The situation reached a point where the HOA itself, the one that had always licked her boots, began to question her attitudes. One of the board members, a balding, tired man from House 6, called an extraordinary meeting. And it wasn't because of the noise, it was because of the amount of resources and time wasted on complaints that led nowhere. They said, in no uncertain terms, that the association's presidency was being used as an instrument of personal persecution. And there she was at the meeting, looking like she had never made a mistake, with a new briefcase in her hands. Yes, she never goes without one. This time, It was filled with clippings of conduct laws, enlarged photos of my backyard, and handwritten notes in pink pen. She said she was fighting for a neighborhood that is quiet, functional, and aligned with the principles of harmonious living, that it was her duty to maintain standards, that the problem wasn't her, but the growing tolerance of widespread noise neglect. As she spoke, half of those present yawned, and the other half texted on their cell phones. When they tried to put her suspension to the vote, she went berserk. She started shouting, said that everyone was colluding with the auditory decay of the neighborhood, and that justice would come. And then she did something no one expected. She pulled a letter out of her pocket, literally, and read out loud that she was filing a new lawsuit, one for moral damage caused by public disdain for his struggle for order. This time, not against me, but against the HOA itself. I wanted to sue the group she chaired. She turned the cannon on her own army. From then on, she dug her own exile. The association officially suspended her, the residents began to ignore her, and the public departments began to redirect their complaints directly to the City Hall's legal department. She became an inside joke. The woman who wanted to silence the sounds became unwanted noise. But even after all that, she still hadn't learned. The next step would be even more ridiculous. And, as always, she would be the only one who didn't see how far she had gone beyond all reasonable limits. After being suspended from the HOA, exposed at the meeting as a delusional noise vigilante, and ignored even by her own allies, you'd think that the woman from House 14 would finally take a break. Perhaps she'd take a vacation to some spiritual retreat in the middle of the woods, where the only sounds would be crickets and wind rustling in the bamboo. But no. For someone who had already tried to sue her own association for acoustic collusion, the concept of retreat didn't exist. She was convinced that the world was conspiring against her auditory sanity and that everyone around her was an accomplice of the great noise mafia. That's when she decided to resort to a last resort, the media. That's right. She emailed a local radio station that covers community affairs and suggested a special report on the collapse of noise laws in the American suburbs. She attached excerpts from the lawsuit, pictures of my yard, reports with graphs made in paint, and even an audio file that, according to her, was evidence of an environmental crime by vibration. The audio was a recording of my dog sneezing. The radio producer, who happened to be a friend of my neighbor, forwarded the email directly to me. She said she had never laughed so much in her life. She added, "If she wants a podcast, we'll do it, but only if it's in the comedy category." With her media failure, she escalated her own downfall even further. She created a blog. Yes, an entire blog dedicated to fighting the sounds of chaos. She published long texts, full of invented terms such as residential eco-stress and progressive vibrational contamination. She signed her posts, "The Protector of Silence." It sounded like fifth-rate science fiction. There was even a timer on the page marking days of sound impunity, which restarted every time someone posted a video of a birthday party or turned on the hose during the day. But the final chapter of her crusade came with a gesture of pure theatrical desperation. She appeared in front of the court with a banner. A banner in the middle of a public sidewalk saying, "Justice for silence. Noise is also violence." She was standing there with sunglasses, a cap, a bottle of water, and a pile of leaflets that nobody picked up. A man rode past on a bicycle and shouted, "You again! I thought you'd lost your mind long ago." She pretended not to hear, but her body froze for a second. The court security guard, fed up with the antics, called the administration. The district judge? Guess who? My brother. He received the warning with an expression of pure embarrassment. Later, he called me to say that she had filed a new petition, trying to reopen the case on the basis of new sound evidence, including a recording she said she had made from inside her own fridge, picking up nocturnal vibrations from my side of the wall. The petition was denied before it even reached the plenary. filed with the following observation: content without merit, incoherent, and based on subjective interpretations of everyday events. A polite response to say that the court has no time for the musings of those who hear noise, even in silence. A few days later, she appeared wearing a medical anklet, not by court order, but because she swore she was sensitive to microwave frequencies. She started walking around the neighborhood with an aluminum umbrella, saying she was protecting herself from the acoustic radiation of the surrounding houses. He went so far as to threaten to throw salt on the lawn of a neighbor who had installed a speaker in his garden. She claimed that the sound was subliminal. At that point, the woman was no longer a cause for anger. She became local folklore. The people on the street made a betting pool to see what her next theory would be. The options ranged from sound conspiracy led by crows to plants that make noises for revenge. The prize was a box of earplugs. In the end, all that remained of her was the figure of a person who had lost the war against her own auditory ghosts. Her house became quieter than ever, not out of respect, but out of indifference. No one argued with her anymore. No one answered her letters anymore. She was the echo of an empire of invented rules, now crumbling under the weight of its own exaggeration. My brother continued to serve as a judge, more respected than ever, and every time he sees someone arguing in court over something silly, he comments, "At least it's not about lamps that make noise." The neighborhood reorganized itself, people laughed again without guilt, and the sound of life continued to flow, freely, as it should. The woman of House 14, even in isolation, still maintains her blog. She updates it once a week, but now nobody reads it, and the only comments are bots offering tinnitus treatment. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.